Hey guys, welcome to this episode of Context is King. I'm Rebecca Brayton, and with me as always is WatchMojo CEO and founder Ashkan Karpusrushan to discuss the evolution and maturing of Snapchat's Evan Spiegel. Whatever that means.
Are you on Snap?
I have the app on my phone.
All right, yeah, ditto. So full disclosure, I realize I should do this. I don't want to say it's at the end and bury it. At this present time, I do own some shares in Snap. So that's just disclosure. Otherwise, you know, I might go to jail or something.
Okay, fine.
Okay. No, that's illegal. I'm pretty sure I should say that otherwise.
So Snapchat versus Facebook basically is what
So let's start off. You should have said, well, why are you long shares? So I never used Snap personally. I would say after YouTube, Snap has emerged as our #2 distribution platform. In the last 6 months, we've started working with the team. And I was always an outsider. Like, as much as I used to think I got YouTube and YouTube changes, Snap wasn't something I pretended to know, obviously very familiar with it. The reason why, as an executive and entrepreneur, I was like, we should be really focused on Snap was, sure, a few years ago, Mark Zuckerberg meets Evan Spiegel and goes, I'd like to buy Snap for $3 billion or $1 billion or $3 billion. Evan says no. Mark Zuckerberg goes all Darth Vader and basically rips off a lot of the features of Snap, implements them in Instagram. Instagram now has 1 billion users. Snap has like 150 million users. But that notwithstanding, I always said we got to be very bullish on Snap because it's all about the future, right? I'm 41, I got 2 kids, 10 and 8, and I'm always like, just TikTok, Snapchat, you know, Crapster, the latest sexy, shiny toy. Snap is fundamentally very popular with a younger demo. And even though the MBAs in the room are like, oh, well, the risk and this and that, it still remains a very popular app. So I was always like pretty bullish about it. Now, I feel like as an entrepreneur, I get Evan's, probably the state of mind that he has found himself since that's happened. Because seeing your baby be copied nonstop by competitors, you really got to see the forest through the trees. Now, I've always said we didn't invent top 10s, right? So I'm not talking, I've taken I don't even view WatchMojo as my baby. I've always said it. I'm a custodian. For WatchMojo to have gotten to where it did or is, I had to let it go. Like, if you were like, I think we should do this, I couldn't fight with you and fight with him and fight with her and him. And like, you got to pick and choose your battles. But Evan's not like that from what I've read and people that know him. They're like, look, he's very much a product guy. He's focused on the details. So if you think about it, he says no to Zuckerberg steals and copies everything, which is Facebook's playbook, and that's fine. And Instagram blows up. And then even though they IPO and they're trading at $20, $30 billion, stock goes down. So you every day, even though you have all the money, once you have money, you don't care about money. You care about like validation, success, being right. So every day for years, people are probably in his ear saying, you were wrong. You should have sold to Facebook. Look what they did. They're going to bury you. They're going to kill you. They're going to do this and that. It starts to weigh on you. At some point, you're like, maybe I did make a mistake. Maybe I should have sold. Now, that's half of it. The reason why I was never long, I was never bullish as a stock on Snap, wasn't because they lost money or because of anything else. It was because they weren't very open. Like Warren Buffett says, if you're going to invest in a stock, you want candor from management, but you also want some kind of transparency. And with Snap, it was always this black box, and I think some of it was just them being paranoid. I think a lot of it was them being in LA, this whole gatekeeper mindset, studios. Like, ooh, we're behind the fence. You don't know what's going on. Like their chairman is Michael Linton, former CEO of Sony Pictures, the dude who was involved with the hack. All his emails were. Anyway, bad time, bad place. So the point is, I personally had no opinion. Like, as a product, I was like, yeah, I don't really care if Snap is copying them. Young, 13, 24 users are still very much enamored with it. And then 2, I was more concerned with this lack of visibility in the business. But everything changed when I went to their summit. So for the first time, you heard not just Evan, but his co-founder. 2, we live in an era where Facebook and YouTube, every headline that comes about them is negative. And it's like, brand safety issues and privacy issues. And I think what Snap is really doing well is actually, it's not a free-for-all where everybody can upload their content. So advertisers spend over $1 billion a year with Snap, and I feel like that's really going to accelerate. I don't want to talk too much about the product, but there's a few great articles on Digiday and elsewhere, and I'll link to them at the bottom, where you see they're basically taking a page themselves from these Asian messaging platforms where they're going to move into gaming, casual gaming. Two, instead of others just ripping off their features, they're going to become basically like a platform that others can build upon, right? So it's kind of a change, right? It's kind of like, hey, we are not YouTube, we are not Facebook. So I feel like as a company, product line, they've matured, they've embraced, I feel, the right way of doing things, being less closed, more open. As a management team, I feel they're more open, they're transparent, they're putting themselves out there. I think they did hit rock bottom when their stock hit $5, that they kind of were like, hey, it doesn't seem like there's anywhere else to go, this isn't working. But now, literally, I was sitting there, by the end of the day, I was like, you know what, I don't buy shares often anymore because I'm too busy to follow stocks. But I was like, I like the story. I could see why advertisers are going to flock to it, and I could see why users are going to start spending time on it. And if other developers start building things in them, and I think it goes back to Evan was probably in a very isolated, lonely spot. A lot of his execs that he recruited before the IPO, no knock, a lot of smart people, but they were probably mercenaries. I don't know how much they cared about his, he got up there and he said something, quote, "Our camera lets the natural light from our world penetrate the darkness of the internet." End quote. Who is he talking about there, do you think? That's like, we are the Jedis, and you got Darth Vader and his crew across upstate. So I kind of feel like he went through his own, like we talk a lot about the state of mind of an entrepreneur, and I don't pretend to have any insights, but just common sense. I think he probably found himself in a place where all these people that kind of came to him and said, I'm going to build this business with you, once the IPO came out and the stock went down, the shares and options were underwater, they bailed. And I think after like maybe a little bit of frustration, a little bit of sulking, then he's like, screw this, life is good. I've got my company, I'm running it, I got the team now in place, we're gonna kind of turn around product, and I think it's now positioned at least the same way that a few years ago Twitter had this massive turnaround. So I'm extremely bullish on Snap now.
Right. So Soundbite.
Yes.
What has been their biggest mistake and what has been their biggest success?
I think you need to be transparent. You need to explain yourself. People mistake explaining yourself with like, I don't owe you. No, two things. Like exposing yourself to people stealing from you, but that's a part of life. Good ideas are meant to be riffed on, and Snap, I'm sure, was inspired by other things. But I think when you don't open up, you can't get the stakeholders. You can't get investors. You can't get media. You can't get other ecosystem developers. You can't get users. Users may not care, frankly, in this context. And you can't get advertisers to embrace you. But I'm sitting there, and like the EVP of digital marketing at Universal is going on and on about how much he loves Snap and what a great partner they are. And I'm like, I don't know too many people that would go on stage and associate themselves with Facebook or even YouTube. And those are great platforms. So Snap has this thing going for it that right now it could be the right company at the right time. And I would say this, whether I own shares or not, I would say I own shares because I feel this way, not the other way. I just got in literally at their summit. But so I think that's the key, is they were too black box-ish. And that doesn't really work in 2019. You got to explain to people what the f you're going to do because nothing makes sense. You know what I mean? Like these are all like new models and new companies. And then what was the second question? What is their biggest mistake and what's their biggest I think their biggest asset is in the context of that in my world, I'm not a developer, I'm not a user. I think it's in the world of like content and advertising. I like the fact that it took us a year. Now, everybody will say, and I'm sorry to hurt anybody's feelings, Snapchat was like this frat boy mentality and nobody really liked, when people would go interview there, they would come back and tell me like, oh my God, toxic. Not toxic like Me Too toxic. Toxic like I thought I left college in the frat. And I think they got that out, but when they were the big man on campus, right? And then I feel like the IPO humbled them, the IPO crash, post-IPO crash of the share price, humbled them a little bit. And I think they kind of had to grow up very quickly. But I like the fact, despite that they weren't taking on content partners. And it was kind of a quality versus quantity play. And I feel that is a good story right now. I feel that is something that marketers want. The last thing marketers want, or even if you're a premium content producer, is like that you're hanging out with in a warm bucket of spit.
Yeah, I think
you're like, yeah,
yeah, sure.
I don't want to be in a warm bucket of spit.
I definitely don't. I mean, I keep asking this question, but who's going to rise to the top on Snapchat?
Yeah, okay. Snapchat is, the mistake I made with Snapchat on day one was thinking it's one product. So Snap now it's an ecosystem. I got it. I was sitting there, and despite being old and outside, but I was like, I get it.
Explain it to the old people.
No, but I was like, Snap is like, let's say 5 to 15 different things. I mean, it was 5 different things already, and with all of their announcements, it's like 20 different things. So Snap is this kind of like, it's a phone company. So already I think you see the vision, capital V, lowercase v. But it's, first of all, it is a phone. And the interesting thing is, with Snap is that it is basically camera, phone, as a software, not as a hardware. So that's a rethinking if you still think of phone as this hard thing that used to be big. It's true now, and especially we're going to have chips in our head where, you know, it's more
That'll
of a...
be the next episode.
That's the next episode at this rate. So I feel like one is that. Then there's the messaging factor. But then there's also just experiences, like that moment that you're in. So like with Discover, it is a different kind of storytelling where if you are 14, most of the content you consume isn't a 90-minute feature or an hour-long documentary. So I feel like in our universe, it's about the storytelling aspect, and it's just totally rethinking. And I would say it's very much about, like, in the moment, stories that have an impact and a meaning to you then and there.
How do you guys use Snapchat? Let us know in the comments, and we will see you next time.